Hello, thanks for coming to my talk. My name is Missy Kofoed, and I am a lecturer in the Chemistry and Biochemistry department. And the title of this talk is Engage and Connect Using Classroom Response Systems for Better Learning. So today I wanted to talk about some of the reasons to use classroom polling as well as some of the features of Poll Everywhere, which is the classroom polling response system I used for this last spring semester. The face-to-face courses that I teach are predominantly lecture-based courses with high enrollments, and so because of that, there are often 300 or more students and only one of me. So some of the biggest challenges I face are how to incorporate active learning into my lectures, how to provide timely feedback to my students, and also how to help build community among students in the class. If my classes were smaller, there are maybe some other strategies that I would use to achieve some of these goals. But I do think that polling can effectively be used in a classroom of any size. So polling is a great option for formative assessment. It provides the opportunity for me to provide real-time feedback. It also allows me to hear from all students in my class, not just the frequent contributors or the students, that are brave enough to raise their hands in a large classroom. In addition to questions designed to assess student learning, I also design questions to help address common misconceptions because there's value in thinking about what student learning looks like when it's not there. And research also shows that if you guess an answer, even if it's wrong, you're more likely to remember than if you were just told. The last way that I use polling in my courses is something that is a little newer for me, and it's a suggestion that I implemented after seeing it modeled in Kelly Hogan and VG Sathy's keynote talk at the 2021 ETE conference, and that is to help build community among my students. So there are a lot of different options for classroom polling. I had previously used iClickers, but switched this last semester to Poll Everywhere for a couple of different reasons. The first is the diversity of question types available, and I'll show you some of those in just a minute. And the second is that with an individual instructor plan, students don't need to purchase an individual subscription or remote. So the individual instructor plan runs about $350 a semester. So far, I've been able to get my department to cover that cost. But you have with that an unlimited number of classes and a maximum really of 700 participants in each class. So in particular for my large courses, this is very cost effective. You can also require that students register with their student ID, which allows me to match and import their participation grades in Canvas. So I used to require that students purchase an iClicker or an iClicker subscription that they would use to participate in class, and then through participating, they could earn a few extra credit points each semester. And I felt okay about this because I use an OER text and I provide all of the other course resources for free, so this was the only thing that they had to purchase for the class. But I always got comments from students on my evaluations that they felt like they were paying for extra credit. And even though it drove me crazy, they weren't completely wrong. So I've liked being able to keep costs down for my students while also encouraging attendance and participation, and also having a way to at least initially assess student learning in the course and provide real-time feedback. So I use this program in my face-to-face courses, but Poll Everywhere works for any synchronous course, whether face-to-face or online. There are, of course, like I said, other polling options. I've listed a couple below. Vivox has some similar features as Poll Everywhere, and it's an option that I might consider in the future, but I don't personally currently have any experience using the program. Okay, I wanted to show you just a few of the question types available in Poll Everywhere. So the most familiar option is a multiple choice question. These questions can all be embedded in your PowerPoint if you have the Poll Everywhere app or add-on installed on your computer. And it is installed on a lot of university computers, or you can just request that it's installed. Another type of question that I really like is the clickable image question. So Poll Everywhere has a few pre-designed images, but you can also upload any image of your own. And this is where I start to think about building community among my students and helping them realize that they're not alone in the class. So this question says, how are you feeling about your mastery of the topics covered in chemical kinetics? And students can select, the happy face or the frowny face or somewhere in between. And one of the things that I hope students realize with this is that regardless of where they're at on this spectrum, there are other students that are right there along with them. This is another type of clickable image question where I ask them to apply a concept from a previous unit as we move into a new topic. And so with these types of questions, you can allow students to respond once, or you can allow students to respond multiple times, which would be the scenario here. Also, in an effort to help build community, I've included some questions that have nothing to do with chemistry. So this is a question from right before the NFC-AFC championship games. If you're a football fan, I usually put these questions up like at the beginning of class or just as class is starting. I'm from Wisconsin. I'm a lifelong Green Bay Packers fan. And if you don't follow football and you would like to have a reason to become a Green Bay Packers fan, our current quarterback, Jordan Love, was formerly the quarterback here at Utah State. So that's kind of fun. I'm also a later in life Taylor Swift fan, so I threw that option in there as well. And the interesting thing that I noticed when I asked this question was that here we are in the classroom. It's 8:30 in the morning. It's the middle of the cold, dark winter, and it got all of my students talking to each other, kind of woke them all up, and that was kind of the point. This program also has word cloud questions. So this was a question that I asked my connections class last year. What one word describes how you're feeling as you begin your college education? And I like these types of questions because they don't single any students out, but they do help students to realize that a lot of these types of feelings are common among their classmates. So they, again, start to feel that sense of community. This type of question in Poll Everywhere is called a 2x2 matrix. It's really just another type of clickable image. So this graph image is available in Poll Everywhere, and then I just added the axis labels and created a new image. So you can see on the y-axis up toward the top is I feel very comfortable with the material covered so far, and down on the bottom is I feel very confused about the material covered so far. If you look at the x-axis, you can see over here on the left, I've worked none of the suggested self-test problems, and over here on the right, I've worked all of the suggested self-test problems. And so this is a question that I included in my first year chemistry course for science majors, and I included a question like this for a couple of reasons. First, it allows students to self-reflect on where they're at in the course. So I do this toward the beginning of the semester. Second, it allows students to see that regardless of where they're at in the course, that they weren't alone. And then third, it allowed me to provide guidance to students depending on where they were at. So for example, if I had students answering down here in the bottom left quadrant, I feel very confused about the material so far and I've worked none of the suggested self-test problems, I can address that subset of students in the class without picking on any student in particular and say, okay, here are the next steps you should take to start to move you in the upward direction on this graph. And even I can mention, okay, for those students that feel very comfortable with the material so far, but that haven't worked any of the suggested self-test problems, these are the things that we want to be aware of as we continue to move through the course. So I can kind of address each of these quadrants and give students suggestions with respect to how to proceed moving forward in the class. One last question type I'll highlight is the upvote questions. So in this scenario, students can respond to a question and then vote on theirs and other answers. So in this example, I asked which topics students would like to review before our upcoming exam. And so students can enter in their own suggestions They can also upvote the suggestions of their classmates. So it gave me a really great starting point. This doesn't show the responses of all my students, but it gives you a really great starting point with respect to, okay, how do I want to structure this review session? What are the most in-demand topics that students would like to see covered? Those are going to float to the top of these upvote questions. So Poll Everywhere has some other additional question types. I've listed some of those here. Some of these are just variations on other themes, really. And one of the things that I really like about Poll Everywhere, and this is not a sponsored talk by any means, but anyone can sign up for a Poll Everywhere account for free with full access to all of these question types. So if you were curious, you could go play around with no commitment. You can also use this polling program for free with a limited number of responses. I think 25 responses max is what you're limited to. But if you had a small class, you could even use this without purchasing a subscription at all. My other requirement for a polling system was that I wanted to be able to track student progress and link it to their A number. And where I use Poll Everywhere in multiple courses, I'll provide students with a link to my specific course, and then they can register and enter their A number. It's not completely intuitive, the screenshot that I've included for my students' help, but students would need to click on registration, and then your name will show up here at the top. They would then click on that and then enter their student ID here at the bottom. But as long as they've created an account, they could really do this step at any point, and it will keep all of their past data. And then as soon as they enter their A number, that will all be linked to their student ID number. This is going to allow you to create a report in Poll Everywhere. So I track participation weekly and update those points in Canvas. So I would go into Reports and create a gradebook report with all of the questions that I've asked up to that point in the semester. So this report will be a CSV file that looks kind of like this screenshot I've included up here at the top. You'll be able to see the student name that they registered with and also their custom report ID, which is where they would have entered their A number. And then there's a lot of information that's included in this report. Rank takes into consideration not only correct responses, but the speed with which students respond. So if you wanted to have, a competition, I generally focus on participation only. So I look at this total answered column, which is going to give me the total number of questions that students have answered, and I can compare that to the total number of questions that I've asked. I also use this column because if you ask questions that don't have a correct answer, it will not be included in this grade section here. This just looks at the total number of correct responses. So I tend to focus on participation only, looking at the total number of questions, again, answered versus the total number of questions I've asked. And then the easiest way I've found to match this to the gradebook is to create an assignment in Canvas. So you can see down here the screenshot at the bottom. This is an export of my Canvas gradebook, and I've created the assignment Poll Everywhere Participation, and then your Canvas gradebook will export with ID, SIS, user ID, all of the information that's needed to import grades into Canvas. And then I'm able to match up student A numbers and report the total number of questions that students have answered in this column here, Poll Everywhere Participation. Now, I am not a wizard with Excel, like I'm sure some of you are, but some Googling allowed me to generate a formula that would allow me to take these columns from my Poll Everywhere report, this custom report ID, and the total number of questions answered, and copy them into my Canvas gradebook export and match up those A numbers so that I could just copy the number of total answered to my assignment in Canvas. And I can do this weekly without too much of a hassle. So if you're also not an Excel wizard, just send me an email and I'd be happy to pass along that formula. I'm sure you could figure it out on your own too. It took me a little bit of time because my knowledge of Excel formulas is pretty basic. The last thing that I wanted to just show in this presentation was some data from 2 of my classes. So Chemistry 1220 is a class taken by first-year science majors, and Chemistry 3700 is a class that's generally taken by pre-health, nutrition and dietetics majors. A lot of times students in this class are juniors. And so you can see, regardless of the class, most of the students felt that the use of the system increased their engagement during class and encouraged them, at least somewhat, to attend class. You can also see that adoption willingness was influenced by the fact that this was available at no additional cost to them. And if you start to add up these percentages, you may notice that they don't add up to 100%, and that's because there was a not applicable option. So you can see that students generally like using these polling systems, at least to the point where they're willing to use them if they're provided for free. Okay, I hope this overview on classroom polling, specifically Poll Everywhere, was helpful. If you have any questions, I'm always happy to chat. I've included my email address here. Thanks for attending my talk.